The string quartet faltered as my husband's private words echoed through the silent gala. Once the campaign's locked, we phase her out. From the back of the room, I, Sarah Caldwell, 38 years old and the architect of his demise, watched his world turn to ash on the massive screens he'd set up for his victory speech. He was a predator in a tailored suit, but he had underestimated his prey. He locked eyes with me, finally understanding that I wasn't his bedrock. I was his executioner. Before I share my story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Smash that like and subscribe button if you believe revenge is a dish best served cold. You're gonna want to hear what happens next. I stood in the Kogod courtyard, the Smithsonian's heart transformed into a glittering stage for Ethan's fundraising gala. Crystal chandeliers cast soft light over the crowd, their champagne flutes catching the glow like stars. The air buzzed with the low hum of power, senators, donors, journalists, all weaving through the room like threads in a tapestry I'd spent a decade stitching together. My dress, a deep emerald silk, hugged my frame, chosen not for vanity but for the armor it provided. Every smile, every nod, every carefully timed laugh was a calculation, a performance honed over years as Senator Ethan Caldwell's wife. Ethan moved through the crowd like a predator in a tailored suit, his handshake firm, his smile disarming. He was in his element, a man born for this stage, his voice carrying just the right blend of warmth and authority. "My wife, Sarah," he said from the podium, his eyes finding mine, "my bedrock, my chief strategist." The crowd murmured approval, and I smiled, the kind of smile that hid the ache in my chest. Bedrock, strategist. Words that honored me while tethering me to his shadow. For 10 years I'd poured my father's fortune, my mind, my very soul, into making Ethan Caldwell a name that echoed through Washington. Tonight, I thought, was our triumph. But then I saw it, a flicker, a glance that lingered too long. Ethan's eyes met Isabel Hayes's across the room. She was striking, her red dress a bold slash against the muted tones of the gala, her smile sharp as a blade. A lobbyist with Capitol Hill in her pocket, Isabel was no stranger to power. But that look, it wasn't just admiration. It was intimate, practiced, a secret shared in plain sight. My stomach twisted, a cold knot forming where pride had been moments before. I told myself it was nothing, just the paranoia of a woman who'd spent too long analyzing every angle, but the seed was planted, and it wouldn't let go. I moved through the crowd, shaking hands, laughing at the right moments, but my eyes kept drifting back to them. Ethan's hand grazed Isabel's arm as he leaned in to whisper something, and her laugh was a low, private thing. My heart pounded, but I kept my face serene, my steps measured. This was my night, our night. I wouldn't let a fleeting glance unravel me. Not yet. The gala stretched on, a blur of toasts and promises. Ethan's speech was flawless, painting a vision of a united America, his presidential candidacy all but announced. The crowd roared, and I clapped, my hands steady despite the storm inside. As we left the courtyard, Ethan's arm around my waist, he whispered, "We did it, Sarah." His voice was warm, but his eyes were already elsewhere, scanning the room for the next handshake, the next deal. I smiled, but the knot in my stomach tightened. Something was wrong. I just didn't know how deep the fracture ran. 3 nights before the gala, our Georgetown townhouse was quiet, the kind of quiet that amplifies every small sound. Ethan was out, another late-night strategy session, he'd said, kissing my forehead before leaving. I sat in our living room, a glass of wine untouched on the table, the silence pressing against me. Then I heard it. A low, insistent buzz from the hall. Not his usual phone, the one that never left his side. This was different, buried in the depths of his gym bag. I shouldn't have looked. I told myself it was nothing, just a forgotten device, a staffer's mistake. But my hands moved before my mind could stop them, pulling the sleek black burner phone from the bag. My fingers were cold, trembling as I stared at the screen. A passcode. 4 digits? I tried his birthday, our anniversary, nothing. Then, on a whim, I entered a date I didn't recognize, 3/2. The phone unlocked. What I found wasn't just a betrayal, it was a conspiracy. Text after text, a thread between Ethan and Kitten, Isabel Hayes. The words seared into me, each one a blade. "Once the campaign's locked, we phase her out," Ethan wrote. "Her money's the key, but she's too smart to keep close post-election." Isabel's reply, "Don't worry, darling, I'll handle the optics. She'll be out of the picture and no one will blink. My breath caught, my vision blurring. It wasn't just an affair. They were using me, my father's fortune, the Langford legacy, the political empire I'd inherited and handed to Ethan on a silver platter. 10 years of marriage, of sacrifice, of believing we were building something together. It was all a lie. I was an asset, a stepping stone to his presidency, to be discarded once the prize was won. The phone slipped from my hands, landing with a soft thud on the hardwood floor. I sat there, the room spinning, my heart a hollow drum. Every moment flashed through my mind, every late night I'd spent crafting his speeches, every donor I'd charmed, every dream I'd buried for his. I thought of my father, the legendary kingmaker who'd taught me to play the game better than anyone. Had he known? Had he seen this in Ethan and still pushed me toward him? The thought was a fresh wound, raw and bleeding. I didn't cry. Not then. Instead, a cold clarity settled over me, like frost on a winter morning. I picked up the phone, my hand steady now, and scrolled through every message, every detail of their plan. I wasn't just a scorned wife, I was a strategist trained to see the board, to anticipate every move, and Ethan had underestimated. That was his first mistake. I couldn't sleep that night, the burner phone hidden in my dresser like a ticking bomb. By dawn, I knew I couldn't face this alone. I needed someone I could trust, someone who understood the game as well as I did. My father's old contacts were a short list, but one name stood out: Marcus Thorne, a retired Secret Service agent turned private investigator. He'd been my father's shadow, his most trusted man, and now he was my only hope. I called him from a payphone in a gas station parking lot, the morning air sharp against my skin. "Mrs. Caldwell," his voice was gravely cautious. "What's this about?" I didn't explain over the phone. I gave him a time and a place: Rock Creek Park, a secluded bench far from prying eyes. When I arrived, Marcus was already there, his weathered face unreadable. He was older than I remembered, his hair gray at the temples, but his eyes were sharp, assessing me like he could see every crack in my armor. "You look like your father," he said, not unkindly. "Same steel in your spine." I told him everything, my voice steady despite the ache in my chest. The burner phone, the texts, the plan to use and discard me. I didn't cry or beg. I laid it out like a briefing, cold and precise, because that's what I was trained to do. Marcus listened, his expression darkening with every word. When I finished, he leaned back, exhaling slowly. "You're not just taking on a man, Sarah. You're taking on a machine. Ethan's got friends in high places and they won't like this." "I'm not asking for a divorce lawyer," I said. "I'm asking for a counterintelligence operation. I want to dismantle him, Marcus. Not just for me, for everything my family built." I saw a flicker of recognition in his eyes, a spark of the loyalty he'd once given my father. He nodded once, and the deal was struck. We spent the next hour mapping out the first steps. Marcus would use his old contacts to dig into Ethan's finances, Isabel's lobbying firm, anything that could expose their conspiracy. I would play my part at home, the perfect wife, giving Ethan no reason to suspect I knew. It was a gamble, but I'd been playing this game my whole life. I wasn't about to lose now. As I drove away, the weight of betrayal pressed harder, but so did a flicker of hope. I wasn't alone anymore. Marcus was a lifeline, a reminder that I could still fight. For the first time since that burner phone buzzed, I felt a spark of something fierce and alive inside me. Ethan thought he'd broken me. He was wrong. The days after meeting Marcus were a blur of adrenaline and dread. I moved through my life like a ghost, smiling at Ethan over breakfast, just nodding at his campaign updates, while my mind churned with the secrets I now carried. Every touch of his hand, every casual "I love you," felt like a blade grazing my skin. But I played my part, the devoted wife, while Marcus dug into the shadows I couldn't reach. We met in odd places, a diner off the Beltway, a park bench at dusk, anywhere Ethan's people wouldn't look. Marcus was methodical, his old Secret Service instincts sharp as ever. He'd tapped into his network, a web of ex-agents and informants who owed him favors. "Ethan's sloppy," he told me over coffee, his voice low. "He's got shell companies tied to Isabel's lobbying firm, offshore accounts too. They're funneling dirty money into the campaign." His eyes met mine, steady but grim. "This isn't just an affair, Sarah, it's a racket." I nodded, my hands wrapped around a cold mug. The numbers were staggering, millions, siphoned through fake consulting fees disguised as donations. My father's fortune, the Langford legacy, was the backbone of it all. I felt sick, not just at Ethan's betrayal but at how deeply I'd been woven into his scheme. I'd signed documents, trusted advisors, never questioning because I believed in us. Now, I saw the truth. I was the key to his vault, nothing more. The investigation hit a snag when I tried to access my family's trust documents. I'd called the estate lawyer expecting routine access, but he hemmed and hawed, citing updated protocols. When I pushed, he admitted a secondary signatory had restricted my access. The name hit like a punch: Uncle Richard, my father's brother, now a fixture on Ethan's campaign finance committee. My own blood turned against me. I sat in my car afterward, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. The betrayal wasn't just Ethan's anymore, it was a family affair. Marcus didn't sugarcoat it. "They're closing ranks," he said, his voice rough as we stood in a deserted parking lot. "Your uncle's in deep, probably been promised a cut." I wanted to scream, to confront Richard, to demand answers, but Marcus stopped me. "We move quiet, Sarah. They don't know we're onto them. That's our edge." His warning grounded me, but the hurt lingered, a fresh scar on top of old wounds. Then things escalated. Marcus called me late one night, his voice tight. Someone tampered with my car, brake lines were cut, and I got a message: "Back off, or it's worse next time." My heart pounded, but Marcus was calm, almost grimly amused. "Means we're close," he said. "They're scared." I wanted to believe him, but fear crept in, cold and heavy. This wasn't just a game of power anymore, it was life and death. And yet, I couldn't stop. Not now. Not when I was this close to unraveling everything Ethan had built on my back. The weight of it all was crushing me. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, my mind trapped in a loop of Ethan's texts, Uncle Richard's betrayal, the looming threat against Marcus. I was unraveling, but I refused to break. Then Marcus called with something new. "Found a safe deposit box," he said, his voice low, urgent. "It's in your name, your childhood nickname, Star. Your father left it for you." We met at a bank downtown, the kind of place that smelled of old money and secrets. Marcus handed me a key, small and heavy, etched with a single word: Star. My throat tightened. My father used to call me that when I was little, his voice warm as he spun tales of political conquests. The memory stung now, tainted by everything I'd learned. Inside the box was a letter and a data key. The letter was in my father's handwriting, precise and deliberate. I sat in the bank's private room, Marcus standing guard by the door, and read. Each word was a blow. My father confessed he'd chosen Ethan for me, not out of love but strategy. He'd seen Ethan's ambition, his charisma, and believed I could temper him, make him a king. But he also knew Ethan's nature. Ruthless, calculating. He'd collected evidence of Ethan's early financial crimes, stashed on the data key as a contingency plan. A weapon, should Ethan ever turn on me. I stared at the letter, my hands shaking. My entire life, my marriage, my sacrifices, my father's love, was a chess game. I wasn't his daughter, I was his pawn. The man who'd taught me to strategize, to see the board, had played me from the start. I felt the ground give way, my world collapsing into a void of rage and grief. I wanted to scream, to tear the letter apart, but all I could do was sit there, frozen, as tears burned my eyes. Marcus didn't say a word. He just stood there, his presence steady, grounding. When I finally looked up, his eyes met mine, not with pity but understanding. "He loved you, Sarah," he said softly, in his own messed-up way. "This key, it's his way of giving you a way out." I wanted to believe him, but the hurt was too raw, too deep. My father had built me into a strategist, then used me. Ethan had taken that and twisted it further. I was alone, the black sheep in a game I'd never asked to play. That night, I sat in my darkened bedroom, the data key in my hand. It held proof. Bank records, emails, deals Ethan thought were buried. My father's final gift, not of love but of power. I didn't cry anymore. Something harder was forming inside me, a resolve forged in the fire of betrayal. I wasn't just fighting Ethan now, I was fighting the legacy that had shaped me, and I'd be damned if I let it define me. I woke the next morning with a clarity I hadn't felt in weeks. The grief was still there, a dull ache, but it no longer owned me. I'd spent my life building Ethan's empire, but now I'd build my own. Not as his wife, not as my father's daughter, but as Sarah Miller, the strategist they'd both underestimated. Marcus and I met in a cramped motel room, maps and documents spread across the bed. The data key was a goldmine, Proof of Ethan's crimes, from insider trading to illegal campaign funds. But a leak to the press would be too crude, too fleeting. I wanted something surgical, something that would destroy Ethan's world as thoroughly as he'd destroyed mine. "We make a film," I said, my voice steady. "A documentary. Short, sharp, undeniable. We use his own words, his own lies against him." Marcus raised an eyebrow but didn't argue. We hired a discreet production team, friends of a friend who'd worked on political exposés. I fed them everything: Ethan's speeches about integrity, spliced with burner phone recordings Marcus had pulled, our wedding photos juxtaposed with bank transfers to Isabel's firm, my father's letter, its damning words narrated in a voice that wasn't mine, but carried my pain. It was a symphony of revenge, each frame a note in a melody of justice. The work was grueling, late nights spent editing, strategizing, anticipating Ethan's countermoves. I barely slept, fueled by coffee and rage, but I felt alive. For the first time I wasn't reacting. I was creating. Marcus was my anchor, his gruff encouragement keeping me steady. "You're your father's daughter," he said once, and I didn't flinch. I was more than that now, I was me. The film was ready the day before the gala. I watched it alone, the final cut playing on my laptop. It was brutal, beautiful, a weapon forged from my scars. I didn't smile, but I felt a quiet triumph. Ethan thought he'd broken me. Isabel thought she'd outplayed me. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The night of the gala felt like stepping onto a battlefield. The Kogod courtyard shimmered under the chandeliers, a glittering cage of power and ambition. I moved through the crowd, my emerald dress a quiet defiance, my smile a mask I'd perfected over years. Ethan was at the podium, his voice soaring, painting a vision of hope and family values. The crowd hung on his every word, their applause a wave that threatened to drown me. But I wasn't here to drown. I was here to destroy. I'd planned every detail. The technician, a young woman I'd met through Marcus's contacts, stood ready in the control booth. She'd been hesitant at first, but my story, the raw, unfiltered truth of Ethan's betrayal, had won her over. I gave her the signal, a subtle nod as I sipped my champagne and slipped to the back of the room. My heart pounded, but my hands were steady. This was my moment. Ethan's speech hit its crescendo, his words about trust and integrity ringing through the courtyard. Then the screens behind him flickered. The string quartet faltered, their notes dying mid-measure. A murmur rippled through the crowd as my film began to play. Ethan's voice, not from the podium but from the burner phone, filled the room. "Once the campaign's locked, we phase her out." The words were cold, clinical, undeniable. The screen cut to our wedding photos, my smiling face next to Ethan's, then to bank records, shell company names, and Isabel's texts. "She'll be out of the picture and no one will blink." The room fell silent, a tomb-like stillness broken only by gasps. Ethan froze, his face a mask of horror, his eyes darting to the screens as if he could will them to stop. Isabel, standing near the front, clutched her purse, her red dress suddenly garish under the lights. She took a step toward the exit, but the weight of 1,000 eyes pinned her in place. My father's letter came next, his words narrated in a calm, steady voice. "I chose Ethan for you, Star, but I knew his nature. This is my contingency, my protection for you." The crowd didn't move, didn't breathe. I stood at the back, my champagne glass cold against my palm, watching the life Ethan had built crumble. Then the side doors opened, and FBI agents stepped into the room, their dark suits stark against the gala's opulence. Marcus had made the anonymous drop, the data key's contents now in federal hands. The agents moved toward the stage, their steps deliberate. Ethan's eyes found mine across the room, wide with panic, but I didn't flinch. I didn't look away. This was my symphony, and it was perfect. Uncle Richard, seated near the front, collapsed into his chair, his face ashen. The crowd parted as the agents reached Ethan, their voices low but firm. "Senator Caldwell, we need you to come with us." Isabel's knees buckled, but no one moved to help her. The gala, meant to launch Ethan's presidency, had become his execution. I slipped out a side door as the chaos erupted, the night air sharp against my skin. I didn't feel triumph, not yet, just a quiet, steady calm. I'd done what I came to do. Ethan's world was ashes, and I was still standing. The days after the gala were a storm. Headlines screamed of scandal, corruption, and betrayal. Ethan and Isabel faced federal indictments, their names dragged through every news outlet in the country. Uncle Richard resigned in disgrace, his role in the conspiracy exposed. I stayed out of the spotlight, letting the world tear itself apart over the wreckage I'd left behind. For me, there was no gloating, no victory lap, just a deep, bone-weary relief. I agreed to one final meeting, not with Ethan, he didn't deserve my words, but with Isabel. We met in a sterile law office, the kind of place where deals die quietly. She looked smaller without her red dress, her eyes hollow, her confidence gone. She expected a fight, maybe tears or accusations. Instead, I slid a severance check across the table. "You were bait, Isabel," I said, my voice calm but cold. "I was the prize, but we were both pawns in their game. It's over now." She stared at the check, then at me, searching for anger or pity. She found neither. I stood and left, the door clicking shut behind me. It wasn't forgiveness, it was dismissal. I was done with her, with all of them. I moved through the next weeks like a woman reborn. The Langford Foundation, my father's political empire, was mine now. I took it over not as a trophy, but as a responsibility. I stood in his old office, the wood-paneled walls heavy with memory, and looked out at the Capitol dome. The view was the same, but I was different. No longer the senator's wife, no longer my father's pawn. Just Sarah Miller, scars and all, ready to build something new. My phone buzzed, pulling me from my thoughts. A text from Chloe, my daughter. "Can't wait for you to come home, Mom." My heart softened, a genuine smile breaking through. Chloe was 12, too young to understand the storm, but old enough to sense my strength. I'd shielded her from the worst, promising myself she'd never be a pawn in anyone's game. She was my reason, my anchor, the one thing Ethan and my father hadn't tainted. I left the office, the weight of the past still there but lighter now. The scars I carried, Ethan's betrayal, my father's manipulation, weren't just wounds, they were proof I'd survived. I'd inherited a legacy of pain, but I'd forged it into power, into purpose. The Capitol gleamed in the distance, a reminder of the battles ahead. I wasn't done fighting, but this time it would be on my terms. As I drove home to Chloe, the city lights blurred past, a canvas of possibility. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in years I felt free. Not healed, not yet, but whole. The black sheep had survived, and she was ready to write her own story. They tried to break me, erase me, and use my legacy as a stepping stone. But they made a crucial mistake. They underestimated my scars. This story is my proof that our deepest wounds can be forged into our greatest weapons. The lesson I learned is that you are never just a victim. You are a survivor, and your story has power. Thank you for listening. If my journey resonated with you, please subscribe and share your own story of survival in the comments below. Never forget your worth.